Michigan's turn at Big Ten Media Days is come and gone. While there was nothing necessarily groundbreaking, there's still plenty that we can glean. Let's get into what I think are the most important things that came out of particularly what Sherrone Moore said at the podium session here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We are back in doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground. I can say that again because everyone should be back from Vegas. I say a whole publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Thank you to all of you who listen every day, all of our everydayers, and we thank you for making us your first listen, even when I put out a show at 6. It's 6:23 right now. Granted, the second take, thanks to me not remembering to wipe my memory cards. That's where we're at. Today we're going to get into some of Sherrone Moore's comments and why I think they're pertinent. First, we're going to kind of build off of some of the things we talked about yesterday with the culture. But I'm going to go kind of a little bit of a different direction there. Then we're going to get to some more kind of news type things, particularly some of the things he had to say about Ohio State and my thoughts on that. Not what you think, Ohio State fans, and the lurkers out there. And then finally, we're going to finish up with a couple little just tidbits that he had that I think are more positional in nature, that could end up telling us a little something once the season actually gets here. So let's start off, and let me pull it up here. There's a couple different things, that quotes I want to read parts of, and then I'm going to get to my thoughts. So starting out, talking about last year going into this year, he said that the instilled confidence that they have and the confidence that they got in those games, it wasn't a magic potion or something that we did. And it wasn't the way we changed practice because we practiced the same. But the energy, the focus, the level of confidence they had in those games is definitely different than the others. And we'll just continue to apply it like that and just work. So that's pretty big. And then I'm going to add this. He said, I think the energy was up because you find out who you are in adverse situations, right? When you're 15-0 and you win a national championship, everybody's happy all the time. Everybody's dancing. Everyone's slapping each other. When you're 6-5 or 5-5, you really figure out who you are, and we found out who we were. We found out we got a great culture, we got great kids, we got great coaches that love each other, that take care of each other, and that's when you find out who you really are, not when you're 15-0. All right. So that's two of basically four that I want to get to in this segment. I think it's interesting because it's harkening back to one of our themes of the podcast in general that we touch on all of the time. That Michigan is not allowed to get better while other teams are, is generally the precept. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that people don't expect Michigan to be somewhat good. I doubt there's going to be any of the legacy preseason rankings that come out that doesn't have Michigan in the top 25. I'm sure there will be some that are, Bob the college football scout that doesn't have Michigan, but for whatever reason is just super high on, I don't know, name a team that shouldn't be. Right? Like, Purdue's really going to come on strong. Barry Odom's going to change that right now. Right? Like the people that are just going to sit there and come up with their hot takes and pretend like they're normal. So I'm not going to pretend that's a regular thing, but generally, like, Michigan's going to be ranked relatively high. Well, not relatively high, but just ranked. But I think what's interesting is generally coming out of a season, you would look at like how did they finish and, what did they lose, right? Like they finished strong, but it was all fifth year seniors, like a fifth, amazing. They won because of their quarterback, and that quarterback's gone. Okay. Yeah. That you finished strong, but it was kind of a, swan song. Essentially, I was thinking Led Zeppelin, so I almost said it's an in through the outdoor. Incorrect. Or a coda. Presence. The physical graffiti. Okay, I digress. But I think it's one of those things where you look at like, okay, well, why did Michigan beat Ohio State and Alabama? Defense. Okay, well, why did they do it against Ohio State? defensive line, but they lost 3 of those guys. Okay, well, but then how did they do against Alabama? They basically did the same thing with none of those guys. Normally, I feel like people would look and say, okay, not a good year last year, but finished strong. Expectations will be high. It's not what's happening generally. Like, it's happening enough to where it's like they're worthy of being ranked, but then you still see enough people say 8.5 over under, and people saying, I think they'll be under. So not much improvement, right? They can beat Ohio State and Alabama, but that's not going to equate to beating Nebraska or Oklahoma, right? It's odd to me a little bit. So I think that I think it's an interesting insight from Sherrone that the culture. It's a massive thing. People look at other schools and rightly kind of determine everything based off of solely like recruiting. I don't think that that's necessarily what Michigan is, because people were trying to figure out what happened when Michigan got good. Now, there are people that are watching or listening to this that do so because they hate Michigan and they're screaming Connor Stallions at the screen or at their dashboard in their car or something like that. Despite all of the other things that changed, namely culture being one of them. Culture, coaching staff were 2 big things that changed. Jim Harbaugh at that point in 2021 ousted a lot of guys that even I was like, I can't believe you're getting rid of Ed Warner. That feels like a terrible move. It ended up being a smart one, right? Bringing in people that knew Michigan, Mike Hart, Ron Bellamy, Mike Elston, people who went to Michigan. That was part of a move that really worked. But really, it was the culture that really helped things along. And they were telling everybody, and people were like, no, it's Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo. And then Michigan had a similar results the next year, and then even better results the following. I think culture means something. I also think, and I'm not going to read the quote because I spent too long talking here, but like he talked about like Justin Tress and like these guys and the gains they've made. Bryce Underwood up to 230 while losing body fat. Eno Edda moving up, David Poly with big losses. I think also, like, just as you get better at football by playing football, I think for a lot of people, not all, you get better at your job by doing your job. And you have to keep in mind the timing of everything, because Ben Herbert was doing winter conditioning. Like, he was staying at Michigan until Jim Harbaugh made him essentially an offer he couldn't refuse late, like well into him having taken over. And then suddenly everything's got to shift. And before he knows it, an assistant in Justin Tress is tasked with doing Ben Herbert's job. And I think that he, based off of everything I've heard, he's doing a lot, not when I want to say better, but he's being more assertive in his job and knows more what to do. That's going to pay dividends, because that's when you really build things, is in the winter and summer conditioning. And I feel like Michigan's doing a really, really good job of that. I have one more piece of this before we move to the Ohio State thing that I want to talk about. We're going to do that here in just a moment. But before we do, summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, high stakes soccer action, or Formula One racing, love it so much. FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a heck of a lot more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right. Continuing with the Sherrone Moore thing before we get to the Ohio State thing. I think that this was a really interesting comment from him as well. Asked about bouncing back from 8-5. I'm hell-bent on being undefeated every year. That's the standard. You don't want to lose any game. That's the goal to be a coach. You want to be undefeated every year. So for me, yeah, the standard is not 8-5, and the goal is to be winning every single game and to be successful and hoist the trophy again, because once you win one, you get greedy. You want to win another, and that's the goal over here. But we know it's going to take work, so can't be worried about the past, can't be worried about tomorrow because they don't owe you anything. So all we're worried about is today, and that's all we're going to do is work to be the best version of ourselves today. I love it. I feel like Sherrone's got a little bit more of a killer instinct, not than like Jim Harbaugh, and I think like we'll know a little bit if they go out and just demolish New Mexico the way that they should. Because it took, right, like you would have expected against Bowling Green. JJ had an off day. Sherrone was interim coach. Wasn't a demolishment. I was gonna say demolish. That's an inside joke between me and my best friend, but it wasn't a demolition. There we go. Got real English. But then it did. Last year Fresno State. I mean, 30-10, but it took all game to get there, right? Like they were up 23-10 with Fresno State driving, and it was about to be 23-17, right? Like that's where they were. Arkansas State, big lead, blown in the second half. USC, big lead, blown in the second half. Minnesota, big lead, blown in the second half. It took until the penultimate regular season game, Northwestern, before he really found that killer instinct. So I want to see that right out the gates. That's going to tell you a little something, right? If he's able to come in and just, hey, yeah, no, we're going to do what, like, you knew that if Michigan was playing Central, well, they're not Central, they haven't played Central, but Western. You knew if they were playing Western Michigan, not in Germany. We'll touch on that in the end, but I think that then you get you expect it to be insanely lopsided. I mean, yeah, Brady Hoke did the same thing, but you need to see Sherrone Moore do that regularly, and we'll I would imagine we're going to see that this year. But to see him saying things like that, because I just don't feel like that was always kind of necessarily the mindset of Michigan coaches, right? It was just kind of solely like win the Big Ten. And if you have a couple slip ups, I don't think this is what they thought, but I mean, it seemed like there was some contentment with some slip ups, and I'm not just talking about Harbaugh. I mean, we'll go back to like midway through Lloyd Carr. I think of that Texas Rose Bowl. I felt like that game was just kind of like. I feel like that game ended up being. It was almost like Lloyd being like, well. We got close enough. Let's get out of here. Yeah. Sorry, I do. Yeah. Sorry, my mind is getting boggled here. Anyhow, I think that Sherrone's maybe got a little bit more of a killer instinct. So, anyway, let's get to the Ohio State thing. I think this is interesting as well. There was the. This comment here. We definitely addressed it talking about the post-game scuffle. And there will be no more flag planting. There will be no more grabbing the flag. We talked about our new tradition, and what we do when we win a game is to go meet the band, go sing our victors, and stay over there until the other team departs, and that's how we'll operate. Shake hands after the game, show sportsmanship, be cordial. A lot of guys in college football know each other. All these guys, they're kids at the end of the day. They're 17 to 22-year-old kids, and most of them are friends. A lot of them talk before the games, and let them have that. But then as a team, they'll be together as a team and then leave as a team. I think now it's funny. I have a duality when it comes to the post-game skirmishes. Whether it's Michigan State, Ohio State, whatever it is. Part of me loves it, like craves it. Let's see something. Let's go. Let's do it. But the other part of me is the old school sportsman, right? Growing up, going to Christian schools. I remember playing for the Christian soccer team. We won it was a small league, but we won the sportsmanship award. Right? Like that was how I was raised in things. Like you be a proper sportsman. That's why I don't do the trash talk. So, and I especially don't do today's version of trash talk where you take tertiary things and try and really just try to demolish the other person. Like politics and sports have had way too much overlap, man. So I actually appreciate that's Sherrone's mentality. I mean, it kind of was Jim in his mentality, but at the same time, he's the one, he himself caused a skirmish when he was head coach of the 49ers against the Detroit Lions. Enough to, at that point, with me being a Lions and Wolverines fan, before I was well in the media, I was living in California. I was like, I don't ever want to see that jerk become the head coach. I mean, how things changed in 2014. But, right, like, I'd rather see good sportsmanship than not. I will sacrifice my headlines and our talking points for that. And plus, it doesn't give that much more, it lessens the ammunition that rival fans would have. So I'm completely cool with that. It does take away some great moments, but you know what? They had that particular great moment, so we can move on. It doesn't have to just be a thing. Now, bet you anything that if Ohio State wins in Ann Arbor this year, not something I'm predicting, I'm just saying if, hypothetically, I would venture to guess that they will grab their flag and run to midfield regardless of what Michigan does, because they are going to feel like they deserve it after what happened last year. And I don't think anything big is going to come of it, to be honest. Maybe it will, but I don't think, Texas did it. I think Oregon did it too to Michigan, and they were like, whatever. Only one school took massive effect to that and then acted like it's just solely a Michigan thing. Kind of that Eric Andre meme. Why would Michigan do this? Anyway, I think that's a good move. Honestly, I promote the sportsmanship, and I think that's part of the culture, right? Like, as long as these guys are willing to do what we saw, right? Like, don't be like that in game, and I don't think he's saying that at all, right? Like, well, you expect that they would still, like, if there's that moment, like with Roman Wilson's helmet getting torn off, like, you're gonna see a Trevor Keegan type, be it Andrew Sprague or Giovanni El-Hadi get up in the face of a guy that decided to do that. Like, that better continue to happen in game, but after the game, handshakes, high fives, hugs, fine, regardless of rivalry. And trust me, it does happen even with the rivalries. I've taken pictures of Michigan players with Ohio State players and Michigan players with Michigan State players. It does happen after the fact. All right. Couple little other newsy items. Let's get to those. Actually, nope, one more Ohio State thing, and then we'll move on. He was asked about stopping Jeremiah Smith. Can't give away all the secrets because he's pretty good, but do everything you can to make sure the quarterback's uncomfortable. Yada, yada. I don't even need to read all this before I give my opinion. Like, he gets it. It's not all about stopping Jeremiah Smith. I think Jeremiah Smith, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here because we've talked about it twice already. It's hard for me to take a wide receiver's guarantee when you aren't the one in the ball with, you don't have the ball in your hands every single play. The quarterback guarantees that it's a little bit of a different thing. Even if a running back does, it's a little bit of a different thing. But a wide receiver is so dependent on multiple things: quarterback play, offensive line play, and then, doing what he can against whatever coverage he has, and then coming down with it. So, Sherrone gets it, and make sure that I'm not missing something here. But, he mentions he's probably the best college football player that's out there. So he's elite. You got to do everything you can to put the game out of his hands, but it's going to be hard to do that. So you got to do everything you can just as a team to go win offensively, special teams, and defensively. I'm with that. Try to disrupt the other people that he's dependent on, then disrupt him. And on top of it, do everything else you can to make sure that he doesn't beat you. I think that's fair. All right. We're going to get to the couple positional things. We're going to do so here in just a moment. All right. I have some stuff to read, but at the same time, I don't know how much I'm going to read here. Just kind of like paraphrase and move on here. But one thing I do want to read. Sherrone said this, asked about how good the defensive end pairings could be. He said, as good as any in the country. I feel bad for the offense sometimes when they're going against Derek and TJ, but every year it's like you go against the Michigan edge rushers and you feel like every year there's a new guy that pops out. I just think I get that that's real. I think that's funny in a way. Like, kind of feel bad for the offense while they're out there. But that's iron sharpens iron of it all, right? So, no surprise. Anyone that's watched or listened to this show regularly, he says they're 10 deep on defensive line. That's not surprising at all. Talked about the linebackers, and it's like just going through names feels like they've, like, here's the interesting thing. Like, they're talking about 3 starters essentially at linebacker in Ernest Hausmann, Sean Barham, who continues to be called a freak. Those 2 guys and Jimmy Roller. And then Cole Sullivan seems right there. And I let me just put it this way. I talked to someone that you all know. You would all trust their word. Like, they're also excited about Troy Bowles. Now, he was injured in spring, so if he's healthy, that will be interesting to see what he's able to do, right? Like, highly rated guy who went to Georgia, who collects linebackers, and he's the son of an NFL head coach. I think there's a lot of potential there as well. Lots of potential movement at defensive back, but feels really good. Said Shamari Earls is really coming on. That's exciting to hear. Might see some Jair Hill at nickel. That could make some things interesting. But they like having the size also at nickel. Zeke Berry really pleased with where he is at corner. And then he wouldn't really comment on Rod Moore's health. Didn't necessarily get too deep in the weeds with safety. Kind of surprised about that or I missed it some way, somehow. But I think that there's a lot to really like about the defense. Now, offensively, didn't name Bryce Underwood as quarterback. I talked about it yesterday. You can go back and rewatch that, re-listen. I completely think that that's the right move to just, we're going to throw him out there and compete. Kind of reiterates Donovan McCulley as being that dude as receiver. Kind of goes through a lot of the receiver names. So that's kind of it. But I think that it's interesting just positionally. If that receiver group is as good as they make it sound like, although they did the same exact thing last year, I would feel they did it with receiver and quarterback last year. I would feel really, really good about how this season's going to go. That's not saying it's going to be a breeze, right? Like, Oklahoma has a really good quarterback, right? Like, they should feel good. You know, Nebraska has an up and coming, really good quarterback that was kind of, he wasn't thought of as highly as Bryce Underwood, but was thought of as, being pretty close to that can't miss type of quarterback in Dylan Raiola. So, like, they're going to feel pretty good, but they kind of harkening back to segment 1. Michigan doesn't need, like, they're not trying to be that, because it's all about complementary football. So when you take the mentality, you take the depth and all of that. That's where it's like, I'm going to sound like a homer to someone that's listening mostly to national people about this team. But that's because, like, I know more of, like, how Michigan feels about it. Now, it is partially my job to essentially modulate that to some degree. And I'm not always the best at that. But I really do feel like the depth, the names, the culture, all of that's going to play a really big role when it comes to 2025. And then the schedule, right? And that's the last thing. He went more in depth on Oklahoma, asked about Oklahoma. And Sherrone's like, my allegiance is to Michigan. Like, I think that, he was at Oklahoma for 2 years as a JUCO transfer. He's been at Michigan for 8. So now is his time to cement it, because if one of those things, like, he really wants to go and win at Oklahoma, although he kind of downplayed that as well. Go and beat your alma mater. And then certainly that's going to have a lot of Oklahoma people be like, do we have the right coach? Our coach might be that guy that was just on the other sideline. But it's become more clear that Sherrone really loves Michigan. And it really kind of pours through it all. And I think that's it's just going to be interesting to see how this season unfolds. All right, that's it for today. fall camp starts next week. We are inching closer to the season. So we will be back to 5 days a week next week. Excited to get all of that going for you all. We'll do some position previews. We've done them before. We'll do them again, but just with a little bit more knowledge and such. And then eventually we'll actually kind of get to see maybe how it goes starting on August 30th. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again soon. Peace.